The qualifying sessions in the Netherlands concluded with Oscar Piastri taking pole position, overtaking Lando Norris. There's this internal battle within McLaren, currently won by the Australian. Norris dominated the entire weekend, but when it mattered, Piastri snatched the pole position. We also need to talk about Ferrari's performance, which finished 6th with Leclerc and 7th with Hamilton. We should also discuss the performances of others, with Max Verstappen in 3rd and Isaac Hadjar in 4th. Hadjar also had a remarkable qualifying session. Let's look at all the details, analyze where Ferrari lost, and where they are losing significantly compared to McLaren. We'll compare both the times and the onboard footage. Before we start, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos related to Formula 1 and Ferrari. That said, let's immediately look at the standings and comment on them together. First place goes to Oscar Piastri, 1-8-662, who also set the track record, lowering it great lap, 12 thousandths ahead of Lando Norris. Norris, whom we saw a bit flat, gave up in the internal McLaren battle and dominated all sessions by staying first, but when it counts, he loses the pole position. They surely analyzed the data in the green evening, comparing Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. We know that in McLaren, everyone has the data combined, and they also compared telemetry. Piastri managed to take that extra step, as he also said in his post-qualifying statements, improving in the areas where he struggled most, in the corners where he was a bit slower. He had to put everything together, and he succeeded. He managed to secure the pole position. 3rd is Verstappen, and 4th is Hadjar, which we will discuss later. But first, let's talk about Leclerc and Hamilton. How did Ferrari do in qualifying? To be honest, I didn't expect much more than this. I also mentioned yesterday, be careful, that Ferrari is struggling this weekend, so at best, we can expect them to be fighting behind Mercedes and Red Bull as the 4th force. And that's how it turned out. If anything, a Racing Bulls team was also added, which wasn't in Ferrari's plans. So, the goal for the red team was definitely the second row, aiming for 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th, but not 6th and 7th. So we can say that Ferrari has somewhat, actually quite, disappointed expectations. We were hoping for more. They have improved compared to yesterday, definitely, because we saw an improvement from the red team. But it's still a Ferrari that is struggling. We also saw the post-qualifying statements, and that's what Leclerc also said. Leclerc, I will show you the image, and he said to Brian Botzi, P6, this was a very negative lap on my part. It was not a good lap, and you deserve better. So I had a very poor lap. And these were Leclerc's statements. Let's also look at why. With the times in hand, Leclerc did not have a good lap, and it was not in line with his expectations. Leclerc, as we always say, is among the best qualifiers, if we want to put it that way, in Formula 1. In this case, he really struggled, did not have a good lap, suffered a lot from understeer, and therefore was relegated to 6th position. But we also need to talk about Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has been consistently ahead of Leclerc all weekend, and when it counts, he is behind him despite the Monegasque having a negative lap. Unlike Hamilton, even in his statements made after qualifying with Riccardo Adami, he is more positive, meaning he believes in the team's work, wants to improve the single-seater to face the second part of the season in the best way. Certainly, the Ferraris have improved compared to yesterday because they made an extra step in terms of setup. And I think we might find the Ferrari stronger in race pace than what we saw today in qualifying. However, it is clear that Hamilton did not show the performance we expected from him in qualifying for this weekend. We expected a Hamilton stronger than Leclerc, and that was not demonstrated. Now let's also look at the times. Let's compare them together, and I will show you where McLaren makes the difference. So these are the times. I want to point out the sector columns because we see that McLaren has done the fuchsia sectors in the 1st and 3rd. The 2nd sector, on the other hand, was where fuchsia Verstappen made the difference over all the others in terms of driving and smoothness. However, Ferrari is really struggling, truly struggling in the 1st sector, which is where they lose a lot. Why is that? If we look at the differences, Piastri and Norris are 23-3 in the 1st sector, Leclerc is 23-6, and Hamilton is 23-7, losing 3 and 4 tenths in a single sector. With a total gap of 6 tenths and 7 tenths at the end of the lap, you can see that more than half of the gap accumulated during the intersector is lost in the first sector. In short, Ferrari has a significant gap in the first sector, then recovers in the second sector, which isn't too bad, and in the third, they are in line with McLaren. So basically, the first sector is where Ferrari pays the most. Why does Ferrari lose so much in the first sector? Let's also look at the comparison with McLaren. I'll first show you Piastri's onboard to see the difference, then we'll comment together while also looking at Ferrari's images. So, if we go with Piastri together, we see that the first sector is made up of not many turns. It's approximately 23 seconds total. Let's move on. And here we see the first turn where Ferrari loses a lot, and it's a turn that involves a brake, and then a right turn that calls back to a kind of hairpin that goes back. But it's not so much the braking part where Ferrari loses a lot, because during braking, it can also enter quite strongly with lateral support. The problem is at this moment here. Pay attention. Here, where Piastri calls back, you see that he eases the steering wheel and then pulls the steering. That's where Ferrari suffers from chronic understeer. It struggles to rotate the rear of the car and therefore also struggles to have grip on the rear, which results in less speed. He needs to lighten up and adhere to a lower speed compared to the McLaren, which prevents him from being precise. In fact, here the front-end precision is present at the entry. The problem always lies in managing the balance between the front and rear during corner entry and exit. And here, where understeering occurs, he cannot bring the car back onto the correct trajectory at the right speed. He needs to maintain a lower speed. And he struggles in this area against the McLaren, where the difference is made at this point. Another point where the McLaren definitely has an advantage is here, in this fast right turn before turn 3. Here, the McLaren is a single input corner, so in theory, Ferrari performs better in those corners where only a single steering input is needed. What is the problem? The problem is that after there is a hairpin turn, a parabolic corner, which is very demanding, you need to carry a lot of speed into it. So in this case, Ferrari's problem is mainly trying to enter this corner quickly with a lot of speed to then have support and grip while navigating the parabolic turn. Let's also see together here, if we go with Piastri, how much speed he carries into this corner. This corner where Hamilton then did the 360, if he spun it, did the 360, Hamilton did the free practice here. Here Piastri really enters very aggressively, much stronger than Ferrari, and still manages to keep the trajectory and have grip. In this case, also in the parabolic turn, it is necessary to have a significant steering angle. You are pushed more laterally against the asphalt, especially with the banking, the incline. So you are facilitated in taking this corner, but certainly in this section, the McLaren is more competitive, more fluid. It manages to have more grip on the exit, which allows it to have a higher speed through the turn. This is where the difference is made. Sorry if I spent so much time on the technical part, but I wanted to compare McLaren and Ferrari on this point here. And by the way, I also want to point out another thing. Ferrari used a different rear wing configuration as well. In fact, this is the rear wing used by Hamilton, the FP3, the one above, and below we have Leclerc's. You see that Hamilton uses a more loaded rear wing configuration, while Leclerc, or almost maximum load, we could say, uses a slightly lighter configuration. This is because Hamilton needs more grip at the rear, a bit more feeling at the back, while Leclerc can also do without this grip and have a slightly looser rear, so to speak. As we often say, having a bit more oversteer helps him to rotate the car. That said, when you have a more lively rear, you also have a more nervous and unstable car, so it's difficult to be consistent in lap times. That's why Leclerc wasn't able to set a good lap even in qualifying, also being penalized by this choice. Certainly, the setup that helps him be stronger in certain conditions, but he needs perfect track conditions and cannot make any mistakes. Meanwhile, Hamilton opted for a more conservative choice that allows him to have slightly less performance on a dry lap, where he can go as fast as possible, but he is more consistent both in managing the rear tires and in posting similar times. This is somewhat the difference in the rear wing choice, which we also saw in Hungary and Belgium. Both Ferrari drivers chose different setup configurations on those two tracks as well. Now, let's briefly look at. First of all, I want to comment, of course, on Verstappen and Hadjar as well. Verstappen set an incredible time, finishing in third place, because guys, third with Red Bull, which is struggling immensely in this part of the season, and he did the second sector, fuchsia, the best of everyone. I can only say hats off to Verstappen. He posted a masterpiece time at his home track, so we must acknowledge that and congratulate the Dutch driver who achieved an incredible time in this qualifying. But of course, we also have to compliment one of my proteges, meaning a driver I have been supporting in several races since the start of the season, namely Isaac Hadjar. In fact, Yari managed to finish fourth with a Racing Bulls. He is, in my opinion, a driver who is too underrated. He needs to be in an official team in the coming years, I think Red Bull, because now Tsunoda, guys, is fighting every race just to get into Q2. Sorry, between Q2 and Q3, so I think this is not good for Tsunoda. A driver is needed, a second driver in Red Bull, more consistent, more competitive. Isaac Hadjar, our rookie this year, I remember he's a rookie, is having an incredible season. Let's also look at the times. He finished fourth, 5/10 behind McLaren with Racing Bulls. His teammate took 3/10, Tsunoda took another 10th. Now let's look at the standings together. He made a 9-6 and Yari a 9-2, so 4/10. Tsunoda also took from a track where the pole time is 1:86 like Piastri's, so 3 to 4/10 for the other two teammates, Lawson, his teammate, Tsunoda, his teammate, let's say, in the Red Bull sphere, and Verstappen is there at a 10.5. 2/10, just over 2/10. So they are still close, and Yari is 4 ahead of a Mercedes, ahead of both Ferraris. He really had an incredible time, definitely the MVP of these qualifiers, and once again proves to be a steady rookie who makes no mistakes. So, this is a lot for Hadjar, and it must be acknowledged. We've said it many times before. Among all the rookies, Hadjar is the one who's convincing the most, because even Kimi, unfortunately, today finished 10th, improved from yesterday, but he's struggling a bit in this second half of the season compared to Russell, who is more consistent, obviously paying the price for George's experience. We'll see Kimi, when he gains more experience, he'll return to fighting at the front in top positions. I want to believe that Kimi will become competitive again. We'll see the Kimi of Miami, that's for sure. He'll be competitive again, we just need to give it time. As Toto Wolff also said, he's an 19-year-old driver. He just turned 19. It is normal for him to struggle more compared to a teammate who has gained experience at Williams, then moved to Mercedes, and was partnered with Lewis Hamilton, thus being mentored by a 7-time world champion. It takes time for such a young driver debuting in an official team, so I agree with the decision to let him debut at Mercedes. We need to give him time, not put pressure on him, and let him mature and grow, as well as gain more experience in Formula One, which is crucial. That said, after mentioning the other drivers, I will also show the images of the track record, comparing the old track layout with the current one, with the record of 1 minute and 18.85 seconds set by Verstappen in 2021, lowered by 0.23 seconds to 1 minute and 18.662 seconds by Oscar Piastri in 2025. This is a big blow to Lando Norris because if we look at the standings now, we will see them together. It's a ranking that will weigh heavily in the end, also for Piastri and Norris, because tomorrow the important points will be decided. Starting from pole position is a huge advantage for Piastri because he can bring home many points. Right now, the points difference between Piastri and Norris is just 9 points, with Piastri ahead, but this is the most important pole position Piastri has ever achieved, because it was on a track favorable to Norris, where Norris won last year. This year, Norris dominated all the free practice sessions. When you reach qualifying, the most important moment, and your teammate is ahead of you, well, that weighs psychologically. Norris always downplays these situations, but it is something that weighs. And as they also said in the commentary, I agree, I think you should hide a bit when you know you have good potential on a track. You can't show everything right away. You keep a few cents in some corners where you know you can go faster. Maybe you try it a few times, keeping some secrets of the track for yourself, points to leverage in your favor. That is fundamental, and Norris never plays strategy. He never plans it in advance, nor does he play strategy and aggression at the start, where he struggles immensely against his teammates and other drivers. And this is a big disadvantage compared to Piastri, because Piastri is not a start specialist. I think he is very good, very consistent, and cool-headed. He's not like Max, who is strong at the start and in overtakes. Piastri is more of a driver who brings home the result, which is crucial for fighting for the championship and winning it. But if Norris were stronger in overtakes and starts, he could make a difference against Piastri, especially since Norris has the talent. The problem is that from my point of view, Norris is not clever enough to play this World Cup and try to win it. In fact, he is at a clear disadvantage compared to his teammate from this psychological and cleverness perspective. However, I also want to hear what you think because it is a very interesting topic, and I believe that for this reason. Even on tracks where Norris could potentially be stronger, he will lose points to Piastri, which also affects the World Championship. That said, we have seen several images. I will also show you some footage of Ferrari on the Zandvoort track. Here we have Lewis Hamilton. Here we see Hamilton on the track with Gommard. And here we see Charles Leclerc with a different rear wing compared to his teammate. I will also show you the graphic published by Ferrari, showing the 6th and 7th positions in these qualifying rounds, a track that has always been difficult for Ferrari. Because in previous years, it was very difficult, especially in qualifying. Then we remember last year in the race, Leclerc managed to achieve a sensational podium. It will be interesting to see tomorrow what they can do with the strategy, whether they can do a one-stop strategy. It will be 2. If it rains too, that will be a problem. If it rains before the race, there could be a slippery track, and that also affects the tire choice because the tire might wear out faster. There are many variables. Certainly, this is a track where overtaking is difficult. There are few overtaking points, only turn 1, I dare say. So, track position was crucial, and Ferrari played half of its cards on this. Today, with this 6th and 7th place, looking at the standings for tomorrow, we also saw the race pace in both Practice 2 and Practice 3, where Ferrari has improved its race pace. Keeping a good pace, the goal of the red car is to try to reach the top 5, that is, to gain some positions. Maybe Russell can be overtaken, as well as Jar. In my opinion, Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri are unbeatable for Ferrari in the race. Verstappen because he seems to have a better pace. McLaren is flying on this track, so the podium doesn't seem within reach, or at least it doesn't seem that Ferrari can achieve it on this occasion. But let me know what you think in the comments. How did you find these qualifying sessions? Are you more disappointed or happier with the improvement since yesterday? And tell me what you expect in the race. Can Ferrari fight for the podium, or do you expect a top 5? That would already be a lot. In my opinion, it's a top 5, also because this is a track where overtaking is difficult. But of course, we'll also see the rain factor, or variable conditions anyway. Maybe even a safety car that could help Ferrari, that said. The last thing I want to say is also a bit of Alonso's disappointment. 10th, I expected more from the Aston Martin, considering yesterday's free practice and disappointment also that my Antonelli mentioned earlier. Maybe he could have made it into the top 10, so into Q3, also Tsunoda, and of course disappointment with Stroll. Guys, who occupies that Aston Martin 20th, another mistake today. Let's also briefly talk about the mistake in Q1, which I also saved the video of. I wanted to show you, but it's a mistake that an experienced driver can't afford, because now we're talking about an experienced driver, Stroll, making this mistake. Let's say it together. Look guys, he's going for the outside curb with the front left, and then he spins. It's really a mistake. You wrecked the car the day before, and then you make this mistake in Q1. So as soon as qualifying starts, where theoretically it's an Aston Martin, and you can easily arrive, at least in Q2, and hopefully also in Q3, going to make such a mistake. It's outrageous, so the motivation is lost, in my opinion. Stroll has more motivation to stay in Formula 1